my entire life savings had vanished. One minute, the number in my banking app represented years of hard work, careful planning, and deferred dreams. The next, it was a perfectly round, mocking zero. My blood ran cold. Across town, I could practically hear the triumphant laughter of my brother-in-law, Ethan. Just an hour ago on the phone, his voice had been dripping with arrogance. "Relax, Emily," he'd said. "You'll make it back. We just had some bills to pay." And as I stood frozen in his driveway, having driven across the city in a blind rage, a sound like a thunderclap ripped through the quiet suburban evening. His front door didn't just open, it exploded off its hinges. As two figures in black tactical gear stormed his house, I realized his little bill had just come due. And the collectors were not in a forgiving mood. Before the world came crashing down, there was the illusion of family harmony. We just returned from our annual get-together, this year held at a sprawling rental on the Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri. It was supposed to be a relaxing week, a postcard scene of boat rides, barbecue, and bonfires under the stars. My husband, Michael, and I had been looking forward to it. It was the first time his side of the family had all been together in years. Of course, together was a loose term. In reality, it was a week of strained conversations, recycled family jokes that were never funny to begin with, and the slow, simmering resentment that always bubbled just beneath the surface. And as usual, the financial weight of the whole affair landed squarely on my shoulders. I had a successful career in strategic marketing, and the unspoken family rule was that my success was communal property. So I paid for the $2,500 lake house rental without complaint. I stocked the kitchen with groceries from Whole Foods, filled the boat's gas tank 3 separate times, and picked up the tab for a ridiculously expensive dinner out, all after a symphony of well-rehearsed stories from my brother-in-law, Ethan, and his wife, Jessica, about how they were just barely scraping by. I didn't fight it. I'd always told myself that this is what families do. You carry the load when you can. You lift up those who are struggling. That was the narrative I clung to, the lie that made it all feel noble instead of just exploitative. The fantasy shattered the moment we walked back into our own quiet home in Kansas City. I was physically and emotionally drained from the performance of the past week. I tossed my keys on the counter and sank into the couch, pulling out my phone out of habit to check my accounts and survey the damage. I was expecting to be down a few thousand from the trip. What I saw instead stopped my heart. 0. A balance of 0.00. The number was an alien concept. A wave of nausea washed over me. I frantically swiped to the transaction history, my fingers fumbling on the screen. There it was. A series of large, devastating transfers made in rapid succession. $4,000. $5,000. Another 5. My savings bled dry in a matter of minutes. Every transaction was unauthorized, a digital heist that felt deeply, horribly personal. This wasn't some random hacker in another country. This was an inside job. "Emily, what's wrong? You're as white as a sheet." Michael's voice sliced through my mounting panic. I couldn't speak. I just held out the phone, my hand trembling. "It's gone," I finally managed to choke out. "Michael, all of it, it's all gone." He was at my side in a second, pulling up his own accounts. They were untouched. His inheritance, his own savings, all secure. The cold, sickening realization dawned on me. This was surgical. This was aimed directly at me. The call to the bank was a torturous journey through automated prompts and tinny hold music. With each passing second, the dread coiled tighter in my gut. How? Who could have done this? My mind flashed back through the weekend, searching for a security breach, a moment of carelessness. And then the customer service agent delivered the final, devastating blow. "Ma'am, I see one of the largest transfers was sent via a peer-to-peer payment service." The recipient is listed as Ethan Hayes. Ethan, my husband's brother. The world tilted, the room seeming to warp around me. His easy smile at the lake house. His constant complaining about being broke. The moment he'd asked to borrow my phone. It all came crashing together, with sickening clarity. "My battery's dead," he had said with a casual shrug, holding up his phone. "Can I use yours to quickly check something online? Just need to look up an address." I hadn't hesitated. I unlocked it and handed it to him. He must have seen my passcode. Or maybe he'd watched me enter the PIN for my banking app when I was paying for the groceries. The method didn't matter. The betrayal was absolute. He had accepted my hospitality, eaten my food, and smiled to my face while planning to gut my financial security. A cold, hard rage, unlike anything I had ever felt, extinguished my panic. I thanked the bank representative and ended the call. Without a word to Michael, I dialed Jessica's number. She answered with her typical cheerful tone, but the second I mentioned a problem with my bank account, her voice went cold and defensive. There was no surprise, no concern, just a guilty, weary silence. Then she handed the phone over to him. The sound of Ethan's voice, laced with a smug, condescending amusement, was like a spark on dry tinder. "Hey, Emily. Look, I was going to tell you," he started, his tone infuriatingly casual. "We just had some things to take care of. It's not a big deal for you. You're in a different league. Think of it as a family tax. You'll make it back." Family tax. The sheer audacity of the phrase stole my breath. He didn't see it as theft. He saw it as his right. He saw me not as a sister-in-law, but as a resource to be plundered. "If you needed help, Ethan, you ask," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You don't steal. You stole our future. You stole the down payment for our house." He laughed. A genuine, dismissive laugh that echoed with years of disrespect. And in that moment, I understood completely. He didn't fear consequences. He saw me as a pushover, an emotional woman who would eventually complain her way into acceptance to avoid upsetting the family. He thought he'd already won. He couldn't have been more wrong. "What are you doing?" Michael asked, his eyes wide with alarm as I grabbed my purse and car keys. "Emily, where are you going? Please just talk to me." But there was no talking. There was only a singular, burning purpose. The drive across town to their perfectly manicured suburban neighborhood was a blur. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my mind a tempest of cold, calculated fury. Calling the police felt insufficient. An arrest would get tangled in family drama for years. No, this required a different kind of resolution. This required him to see the consequence of his actions right now. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the violation, the profound disrespect. I pulled up to his house, the engine cutting out into the unnerving silence of the street. Lights glowed warmly from inside. I could hear the faint sound of a television. They were comfortable, relaxed, utterly unbothered by the financial ruin they had inflicted upon me. The arrogance of it was a physical blow. I walked up the stone path, my heart pounding a war drum against my ribs. I was a vessel of pure, righteous anger. I raised my hand, my fist clenched, ready to hammer on their door and shatter their peaceful evening. But before my knuckles could connect, the world exploded. A deafening crack, like a lightning strike at point-blank range, tore through the night. The front door didn't swing open. It disintegrated, blowing inward in a shower of splinters and drywall dust. A wave of concussive force washed over me on the porch. For a stunned second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I had come for a confrontation, but I had not brought this. Two men, huge and clad in black from head to toe, their faces hidden by dark balaclavas, moved through the ruined doorway with a terrifying, fluid violence. They weren't angry. They were professional. Their movements made my personal fury seem childish and petty. I was frozen on the welcome mat, an unwilling audience to a play I had no role in. The scene inside devolved into pure chaos. Ethan barely had time to look up from his recliner before one of the intruders was on him, hauling him to his feet by his shirt collar and slamming him against the wall with a sickening, heavy thud. Jessica shrieked and reached for her phone on the end table, but the second man was faster. He backhanded it out of her grasp, and it skittered across the hardwood floor. "Where is it?" The man holding Ethan growled, his voice a low rumble that promised nothing but pain. Ethan, the man who had been so cavalier and arrogant just an hour before, was now a quivering, pale-faced wreck. His eyes were wide with a terror so absolute it was almost feral. "What? I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. "Wrong answer." The words were flat, followed by a short, brutal punch to Ethan's stomach. He folded in on himself, all the air leaving his lungs in a wet gasp as he slid down the wall, wheezing. I took a step back, the cool night air feeling like ice on my skin. The horrifying pieces were snapping into place. My brother-in-law wasn't just a petty thief who preyed on family. He was a fool who had stolen from someone far more dangerous. Someone who didn't use banking apps or file police reports. Someone who collected their debts in person, with interest. In my all-consuming rage, I had been completely blind to the fact that my stolen savings were likely just a panicked payment on a much larger and much deadlier debt. The second intruder, the one who had dealt with the phone, turned his head. The dark holes of his balaclava found me standing in the doorway. He tilted his head, a silent, predatory gesture. "Who are you?" he demanded. My throat was bone dry. I'm here for my money," I whispered, the words sounding absurd even to my own ears. A dark, humorless sound that might have been a laugh rumbled from his chest. "Get in line," he grunted, turning his attention back to the horror show unfolding inside. A knot of pure ice formed in my stomach. Whatever Ethan owed these men, it was terrifyingly clear that the $22,000 he had stolen from me was just a drop in the bucket. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had tried to use my money to patch a hole in a sinking ship. A ship torpedoed by sharks. "Please," Ethan sobbed from the floor, clutching his midsection. "I can get it, I swear. I just need more time." The leader yanked him up by his collar again. "Time ran out," he sneered, shoving Ethan towards the center of the room. The two men moved like a storm, overturning a coffee table, sending family photos and magazines scattering across the floor. Jessica scrambled forward, crying hysterically. "Leave him alone." The second man shoved her back without even looking, and she tripped and fell into a heap near the shattered remains of her front door. Every survival instinct I possessed screamed at me to run, to get in my car, drive away, and never look back. This wasn't my fight. Ethan had made this mess. He deserved whatever was coming to him. But then I thought of Michael. I thought of the years of my life, the thousands of hours of work that Ethan had vaporized with a few taps on a screen. Wait, the word tore from my throat before I could think. I stepped over the threshold, into the wreckage of their living room, holding my hands up in a placating gesture. "Wait, I don't know what he owes you, and I don't care. He stole my money first, $22,000. The leader turned his full, menacing attention to me. He was built like a vending machine, and his stare was heavy, analytical. He was weighing me, trying to figure out if I was a threat, a liability, or something else entirely. "He stole from you?" he asked, his voice flat. "Yes," I said, my own voice gaining a sliver of strength. "He took $22,000 from my account less than 2 hours ago. I came here to get it back." The man let out that same short, sharp laugh. "Lady, he owes us $300,000. My blood ran cold. 300,000. This was out of my depth, out of anyone's depth. I had a choice. I could cut my losses, walk away, and accept the 22,000 as the most expensive lesson of my life. or I could push. I took a breath, my mind racing, the anger being replaced by a strange, cold clarity. "Look at him," I said, gesturing to the whimpering, pathetic form of my brother-in-law. "You and I both know you are not getting $300,000 from him tonight. He's worthless. He doesn't have it, but he does have my money. My $22,000 is sitting in his checking account right now. It's the only real, accessible cash you are going to see. Let me get it back. I walk out of here, I saw nothing, I say nothing. You get a down payment on your loss, and you can have whatever is left, him included." I watched the cold, brutal logic of my proposal work its way through his masked gaze. My money was a bird in the hand. It was real. It was there. It was a tangible win in a situation that was quickly becoming a total loss for them. "Fine," he said finally, the decision made. He jerked his head toward Ethan. "Get it. You try anything else and you become part of the debt." He let go, and Ethan slumped to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. Under the silent, watchful eyes of the two intruders, I walked over to him. "Your phone," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "Transfer it back. All of it now." With shaking, fumbling hands, his face a mess of tears and mucus, Ethan pulled out his phone. I watched over his shoulder, a silent supervisor of my own recovery, as he navigated to his bank account. And there it was, my $22,000. He initiated the transfer back to me. I stood there, my own phone in my hand, my heart hammering until, after an eternity, the notification chimed. The funds were back in my account. "Done," I said, stepping away from him as if he were contaminated. I didn't look at Jessica, who was still sobbing quietly by the door. I didn't look at Ethan, who was now fully at the mercy of the men he had tried to cheat. Their business with him was not finished. They had come for their own pound of flesh, and they were not leaving empty-handed. As I stepped back out into the cool, clean night air, the sounds from inside the house changed. The pleading stopped. A new, more terrible sound began. A series of dull, rhythmic impacts that turned my stomach. I did not look back. I walked to my car with a steady, deliberate pace. I got in, started the engine, and drove away. The chaos in that house shrinking in my rearview mirror until it was just another light in the suburban sprawl. I had my money back, but the cost was incalculable. I had walked up to that house seeking justice for a family betrayal. I walked away a witness to the brutal accounting of the criminal underworld. I learned that night that some debts are paid in more than currency. Some betrayals carve away a part of your soul that can never be recovered. The numbers in my bank account had been restored, but the ledger of my life, the part that tallied trust and family and faith in others, was permanently in the red. The balance had been zeroed out in a way that no deposit could ever fix.